welcome to the show. After the kids go to bed, we talk about love, relationships, and sex. So join us for lively discussion and thought-provoking ideas at Love is on the Air. My name is David, and I'm joined by my lovely wife, Natalie, contributor and chief over at the Feminine Frame website. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. Tonight, we are talking about incels. Natalie, have you ever heard of an incel before?
I have indeed. I have heard of an incel.
And what, pray tell, is an incel?
So an incel is an involuntary celibate. So
now, is that usually men or women who are voluntary?
Usually men, although femcells do exist.
Right. Well, I think they call them M-cells.
M-cells. Oh, okay.
Emotionally celibate.
No, I think there's femcells. I think they're...
Well, I think there's both, yes? Femcell and M-cell?
Perhaps.
But anyways, tonight we're not talking about femcells. We are talking about incels. These are young men who are disenfranchised by the dating and marriage scene. So let's jump into it. Okay. So first of all, we have a Pew Research poll that we're going to jump into. This comes from psychologytoday.com. And we'll go ahead and leave the link in the description of the show notes so you can follow along in our research. A recent poll research study suggests that a tectonic shift in the dating and sex life of men. The study found that among men under 30 years old, over 60% are single, and almost double that of women in the same age bracket. Not only are more young men single, but their opportunity for developing a relational and sexual repertoire have all but vanished, as levels of sexual intimacy across genders appear to have hit a 30-year low. So that's kind of remarkable that among young men under 30 years old, 60% are single. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I'm wondering... There's two things that I'm wondering if they contribute to this. One, online dating. That's got to be a huge contributing factor, I would guess. It changes how we meet with people. It changes how we interact with them. And then the second thing that I'm wondering about is the availability of online porn. Men don't have to go out and seek relationships anymore. So, if they're having trouble meeting women in the online world, then, yeah, in the online world, if men are having trouble meeting women through dating platforms, then they just go online to kind of fulfill that void, is what I'm wondering is what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, all the studies that I've looked at so far kind of confirm the trend that men are having less sex and they're having less dating and they're getting married less. But actually, when it comes to women, there's also the data shows that just marriages overall are going down. Mm-hmm. So one of those things I think you touched on, I'll follow up with. I think that trend of online dating definitely seems to be showing that the more readily accessible online dating is, the less go out in the world and dating appears to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really exacerbated by the 2020 and 2021 lockdown period. People were told that they were going to cause everyone to get sick and die if they went out. So the availability of trying to find someone out in public was really, really hard in those 2 years. So imagine if that was your formative 20, 21 years old during that pandemic period. It'd be really hard for you to learn how to go out and socialize in real life. So I think you're absolutely right on about the advent of online dating. So yeah, just to confirm, yes, I do think we're seeing a trend overall in less marriages and less sex. And those two are not uncorrelated. Overall, people who are married have more sex than people who are not married. And I also think that you're right about the online porn. If men are if the problem of online dating has created less opportunities to meet people in real life, then the problem is solved by the same thing, which is online porn, or that really saps men's drive to go out and pursue women in the real world. Let's follow up on one of those topics, the online dating. Now, the research also seems to suggest that as people go more and more online, it's not actually helping them find someone. That celibacy is going up. So why do you think that is? Wouldn't it be easier to find someone to date and marry, excuse me, if you had the ability to have a wider pool of dating options?
Well, I think that there's kind of a few things going on, and I think that we first kind of have to understand that young men, and this is going to be largely stereotyping here. So, of course, there are some men who are seeking other things, women who are seeking other things, but largely we see a lot of very young men who are entering the dating world. They're not necessarily ready for marriage. They just kind of want to hook up. And then with this women's empowerment and stuff, women are also kind of just wanting to hook up. So there's a social phenomenon aspect going on there. I mean, young men not being necessarily ready for marriage in their early 20s, that's not new. But there's a social phenomenon going on with women, I think, where they're just wanting to go out and have fun and not necessarily looking for marriage. And that's kind of something that's new, I think. And then there are so many men at their fingertips on these dating apps. They are getting, solicited hundreds of times a day potentially. So they've got to narrow this down somehow. So they are just seeking only their dream man. If
You're
that
talking
makes
about
sense.
women, right?
Women.
Women are only.
I'm talking about women right now.
So a woman on one of these Tinder dating sites will have hundreds of messages,
Yeah.
swipes, likes, whatever they do there, thumbs up or
Yeah,
hearting
these guys
your
are just
video.
hoping to get lucky. They're just swiping on everybody, hoping that one girl will say yes, and then if she kind of takes the bait, he'll kind of zone in on her.
So it kind of sounds like a self-perpetuating problem. The more lonely that young men become, the more they turn to these online dating sites. And then the more men on these online dating sites, the more selective women are becoming.
Right. You
And
have
so
to
when you
narrow
have
it down some way.
when you have your choice of any man out of thousands, well, all of a sudden, these fantasy lists of he's got to be. Have you heard of the 666?
I've heard of that.
Yes. So the man has to be 6 feet tall, have a six pack, and make six figures. Now, just if you are just looking at the percent of the population, the average height in America is 5'9". So if you wanting a man that's over 6 foot tall, you're already looking for a minority. And I think right now they said the average man's salary is somewhere in the $50,000 range, maybe 40 to 50. So if you're wanting someone that's 6 foot tall and makes over $100,000, you're already looking for someone in the top 1%. Now, if you're looking at someone who's also athletically built and he has a lot of time for the gym, maybe independently wealthy, and can spend a lot of time going to the gym every day, you're looking at, maybe 0.01% of the population, maybe 1 in 100 guys is like that. So I think with the online availability, women are really having pressure to select just the cream of the crop, whereas traditionally men and women met they were limited with their selection. It was really who your neighbors knew, who your parents, who your mom hooked you up with in high school or something. It's like,
Yeah,
oh,
it was
Sally Joe's got a
within your
daughter.
social circles.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
social circles. But
And then
now
when
we're
you're meeting people, you can kind of get a feel for them. Sometimes if on paper someone is perfect, but then you meet them in real life and there's just no attraction, there's no chemistry.
yeah.
Like, and so that really narrows things down too.
Well, I mean, you've got photo filters, and I think women are really good at this. They've figured out Instagram, which I'm told is like the dating site. There's
Is it?
Tinder, but a lot of people are just kind of window shopping. So they'll seek out this Instagram and look at photos of thousands and thousands of different women or men, and then they say, "Oh, I want that person. I'm going to reach out to them and see if they're interested."
Maybe that's more from the men's side. Maybe I haven't. I mean, I guess I've heard of women being solicited on Instagram, but I've never heard of women soliciting men or being like, I'm looking for a connection. I'm going to go on Instagram. Like they might be interested in a specific guy and go on Instagram to see his feed, but
Yeah, I mean, when you're solicited by every platform hundreds of times every day, you find a guy that already likes you as a woman, and then you go out there and you just select him. You're like, okay, I'm going to look through all these guys. Oh, he's got a nice profile. I'm going to follow up on his profile, and you like him, and then you can reach out to him. So yeah, I think that definitely does happen.
I think if it's
Once
a
he's
woman,
reached out, then there's really no fear of rejection on her part because he's already indicated interest. So, as a man, the sexual strategy or the mating and dating strategy is, you know, just it's volume. It's like you got to petition hundreds, maybe thousands of women. And then if one of them sees your profile and they like it and they return the interest, so I think that's really contributing to men's overall loneliness is that the online dating is not only it's causing the problem that it was purported to fix.
right? And I think it's causing problems for women as well. Yes, they're getting hundreds of solicitations and such, but these men, for women who are looking for a longer lasting relationship, who are looking for long-term commitment, they're not necessarily finding it on these dating apps. These men are going onto these dating apps knowing that they can find a quick hookup, and that's what many of them are looking for. Again, stereotypes. I know there are many successful matches that have been made on dating platforms, but stereotypically these guys are looking for a short-term connection. And a lot of women are being left disappointed as well.
I would argue, though, that women are also looking for short-term commitment. The pressure on women to go out into the workforce and be top earners. I remember like maybe 20 years ago, they started this Women in STEM initiative. They're like, we got to get women in the workforce and we got to get them to be high earners. So this idea that, women are foregoing marriage as well. That kind of brings us up into the next topic. So let's take a look.
Okay.
So according to there's a website, ifstudies, the Institute of Family Studies.org, says today there are fewer Americans married and more Americans single than any other point in the past 140 years. As the figure below illustrates, census data show that the married population peaked in 1960, driven by surging marriage rates after World War II. So not only are we becoming, as a society, and especially men, more lonely, but marriages are dropping off the cliff. So part of that, I think, is, of course, what I mentioned before, is this drive to get women in the workforce. That today there are fewer Americans married and more Americans single than at any point in the last 140 years. As the figure below illustrates, census data show that married proportion peaked in 1960, driven by surging marriage rates after the end of World War II. So this is an article that comes from the Institute of Family Studies, ifstudies.org. We'll link it in the show description. So it looks like that marriage has, since the 60s, just steadily declined. So at the peak, it was 1960, 70% of adults were married. And now, boom, that's dropped off a cliff and it's below even 50%. And that was of 2000. So we're seeing a decline, a rapid decline through the ages. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, so the 60s was kind of the beginning of the free love movement. So that was probably the beginning of the end for marriage. Um, and then we kind of moved towards this push for women to be in the workplace and to prioritize their careers. And so that put the marriage age, I think, later and later, and pushed that age to be a little bit older. And then now we're kind of seeing that peaking. And on the one hand, that's on an all-time high. But we're also seeing men now kind of opting out of marriage. That we have the MGTOW movement, men going our own way. For those of you who don't know, who say, "Hey, we don't need to get married. We don't need to have relationships with women. It's too dangerous. The probability of a divorce is too high. So why even start?" So we're having all these kind of social phenomenon peaking at the same time, I think.
So I think this is pretty crucial time because in 1960, birth control was legalized for use everywhere as a contraceptive. So for the first time in history, and I mean ever, this has never happened before, sex and babies were kind of decoupled. Now I know that there's been, condom contraceptives since for a long time, but this was really the first time that women themselves controlled when and how that they would have children, and that so for the first time in human history, that now women had the main control over when that would happen. So yes, I think that those numbers that we see, all those issues have kind of rolled downhill. Everything you just mentioned probably rolled downhill from that birth control pill. That was a pivotal moment in human history where now all of a sudden women were given the ability to control when they were going to have children. So the idea of sex was decoupled from marriage, decoupled from love, decoupled from relationships, and just seen as this hedonistic pleasure thing, which brought on that free love movement, as you say.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely seeing a fall of marriage, and I also think you're right. You know, everybody knows somebody that has been through a divorce, and it's messy, and it's really difficult. So a lot of people see that and they say, I don't think it's worth the risk. Divorce used to be something that would kind of be initiated by, your local religion, your pastor, your church group, whatever. They would kind of be the ones to initiate and carry on the divorce. But now, it's all done through the state and the government, and there are lawyers involved, and they're on retainer, and they're $100,000 start to finish what it will cost you to get a divorce. So realistically, it's a $50 marriage license you sign and you get married, but getting divorced is a lot messier. So I think a lot of people, especially men, are seeing that. And in recent years, I think the marriage rate is going to continue to drop off. But we also see this in anywhere there's a developed world as well. So in the developing worlds, we still see very, very high rates of fertility, but the marriage and fertility rates in the West are certainly dropping. All right, so you're a young man and you want to get married, you want to find someone to date, and your strategy of going to 100 different girls' Instagrams and liking every photo and begging them to check you out is not working. What do you do?
get out there, get out in the real world, leave the basement. Again, I tease a little bit there, but get out of the house and find some women in the real world. Go make some real friends. I bet if you go to a church, then there are probably women there, or there are people who would love to see you get married and would like to hook you up with someone that they have in mind. Or if you have other single friends, get involved with a friend group, and you'll start going to parties and meetups and just meet girls in the real world.
So when we talk about going out, there's a group of men that are going far out, as in the Far East, as in the Orient, as in South and Latin America, and they're going to Eastern European blocs. They're going anywhere where there are women that are usually from the developing world, and they're going out and finding their loved ones, their partners out there. And these people are called passport bros, or these men are called passport bros. You've probably heard of this, yeah?
I've heard of them more from you. I think you've mentioned them.
Yeah. So these are men that go out and they are trying to find somebody, and they see how difficult it is here in the West to do that. So what do? They go to the underserved developing world, and then they go, okay, what can I find out here? So this phenomenon is starting to be noticed by women here in the West, and also they're complaining about it. They're saying, hey, all the men are going abroad. They need to stay here and date me. So we're going to watch a quick little clip here.
Okay.
And we'll play this here. So let's.
These passport bros are comprised of lonely, broke, overweight, middle-aged men who can't score women in the U.S. because they have nothing to offer besides a one-bedroom apartment with a chirping smoke alarm.
So that's just one woman on TikTok lamenting that there are men going abroad to find their wives. In the beginning of this phenomenon years ago, I thought, man, marriage is so hard. Imagine trying to get married to someone who doesn't share your religion, doesn't share your language, doesn't share your cultural values. Marriage is tough as it is, let alone, trying to marry someone that's completely different from you in a different part of the world. But now, I really empathize with young men that feel like that's the only place they can find love is finding it abroad. See, in a lot of these developing worlds, they still have very traditional gender roles. And so women in these parts of the world are still looking for what men in the West are looking for. The women in the third world aren't looking for high-power careers and full-ride scholarship to the best universities. They're literally looking for someone to take care of them so that they can have children. This is still very much mating and selection process in the developing world. So it makes sense that men who are seeking that traditional family relationship would go abroad to seek them. We see here, so we're going to watch another clip here. This is a Filipina who is a Filipino wife to one of these passport bros. She's responding to the previous clip here.
Exactly why most of your men are leaving. In becoming passport bros because of your attitude and mindset you have. We know to have nothing, and so we are appreciative in life. We are grateful, and we appreciate every penny that our men make that most of you don't do. For you, they don't make enough, especially for your high maintenance life. And yes, you may consider them broke in your high maintenance life, but here in Asia, we consider them rich. And also, we don't see them as overweight. I think they're just big and tall with sexy eyes and big nose. just what most of us attract in a guy. Besides, we always compliment our men. We always make them feel they're the most handsome man in the world. And most of us dreaming to have kids with them so we can have mixed beautiful kids. And don't worry, ma'am, because as soon as they arrive here, they will never feel lonely again.
We don't make enough for your maintenance life, or they don't make enough for a high maintenance life. So, one of the things about men and women dynamics is that women generally will not date someone below them. They won't date somebody that makes less money than them, that has less education than them, and can't provide for them. And yeah, she's saying, look, when you come from the third world, you don't have a high maintenance life. You don't require a lot of money and expensive for, clothes, makeup, jewelry, pedicures. I don't know all the expenses, but they just really don't have that high life. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. What are your thoughts? Is this a good thing, bad thing, or, I mean, I think we are seeing it more and more. And I think we will continue to see it more. But do you assign any moral, or like, is this something we should be worried about, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, I don't assign any moral value to this. I think that there is still that concern that you mentioned in the beginning of this topic about you are seeing somebody from a different culture. They have potentially, they see the world in a different way. They grew up in a different way. How they expect to raise their children might be a little bit different. Just, little cultural quirks and such might be a little different. They might have different expectations on you as a husband. Not to mention all the bureaucracy and red tape and such, and getting them over and visas and all that. So I do wonder if some of these men kind of have an idealized, dreamlike fairy tale vision in their head of what life is going to be like with their bride from another country. So it's just something to consider if you are a man who is wanting to import his wife. Just consider that there might be some cultural differences, and is overcoming those things, is that going to bring more value to your life? And the value that you're getting from your wife, is it worth all these things? And I don't know the answer to that. That's just something hypothetically for one of these men to weigh out in their own mind. But just be aware of that there might be some differences there. And it might not be a fairy tale. It still might be some work involved.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think that overall we're going to see this trend continue. I think a lot of men here in the U.S., I think, when they do the famous statistic that women make 70 cents on the dollar of a man, they're pretty much talking about CEOs and lumping them in the average. But if you look at the median salary, men are making less than women. Men are graduating from college less than women. So I do see that this phenomenon will absolutely continue as men of a lower economic status. They don't have a six-pack. They're not 6 feet tall, and they don't make six figures. They're going to continue to go abroad where women are less selective in terms of what they're looking for. And in some cases, indeed, they will prefer somebody that has access to United States or another Western country, Canada, Australia, European countries. So yeah, I do think that we'll see this continue. Globalization has had a impact on not just economics. It's not just we buy our microchips from Taiwan. It's not just, we buy steel from China. Globalization is now affecting relationships and dating, because how hard is it to meet someone online who lives in the Philippines? It's not hard at all. You start chatting, and then you're only a 10-hour flight away, or probably 12-hour flight away. So yeah, we'll definitely see this trend continue. Is it good or bad? I don't know. It's kind of like supply and demand. It's almost like global economics. As more The real losers in this, in the long run, I think, are going to be Western women.
Right, and
'Cause-
maybe that'll even things out. Maybe once the Western men get to be more of a rare commodity, maybe the women will be less selective. I don't know how this is going to fare.
I think
I don't know.
because women are right now, they're pursuing those jobs and the careers and the education, and they're foregoing the family. They're pushing the family off later and later and later. And now, when they hit 30 and above, they start saying, okay, I want to settle down now. I want to have that family. And their cohorts have already went to the Philippines to go find somebody. So yeah, I think I think the real losers in this. It's hard to say this when you're a woman and you're petitioned by 100 men a day on every single platform. It's hard to call you the loser, but in the long run, women who are prioritizing those things and have unrealistic set ideals for the men they'll mate and date, then yeah, they're going to lose out in the long run because those men are going to go abroad to find a spouse. Okay. So any other thoughts before we close up?
No, did you have anything else for tonight?
No?
That was it. Okay, short episode.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Excuse all the babies screaming, Natalie yawning.
Yeah, no, we're getting a late start here. We've had to stop this like 3 times now just because babies have been crying, and
Yeah.
so it's late.
All right. Well, we appreciate you joining us for another episode of Love is on the Air. And you can join us wherever there are podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and Castbox, also YouTube. So check us out on your favorite platform, and we'll tune in next time. Thank you so much. Until then, bye. And
Bye.
love each other.